Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The great disadvantage of being the seventh speaker is that as each preceding speaker was talking, I was changing what I'd originally written. So having changed it 6 times, it's now I have quite a messy set of notes here. I'll try and restrict my comments to 3 broad topics. First, picking up on the point that Anil just made in his comments. By the way, as you know, Anil has come from the College of Engineering in Pune, which just demonstrates that occasionally good things do come out of Pune. It's a pleasure to have you leading AICT, Anil, and we have great expectations of what will happen with the technical education system in the country under your leadership. The first point that I'd like to make is related to this whole topic of university-industry interaction. It's a topic which for many years in the country was one where more time was spent, I think, in sessions such as this, talking about it and talking about the need for it rather than actually going out and doing it. But that's changed. And over the last, I'd say 10 or 15 years, there are more and more examples of very successful interaction. And that was why a few years ago we decided to launch this systematic process of going out and trying to measure the kind of interaction that was taking place, not just to recognize and award institutes, but because in the process of going out and looking at what was happening in these interactions, we both learned what was working and what wasn't. And as you pointed out just now, Anil, the institutes themselves were prompted with some of the questions that we were asking. And it prompted some of these useful interactions in themselves. A comment that I always make is that industry has a direct interest in contributing to the quality of technical education for a very simple reason. In the long run, the only thing that will determine how competitive we are as firms is the quality of people that we hire, and in particular, the quality of technical people that we hire. And we therefore have a very direct interest in ensuring that each student gets the best possible education. So what I always keep trying to say is that, please, as institutes, do not look to industry coming in and interacting as doing this out of social service. Expect this and demand this from industry because it's in industry's own interest to contribute as much as it possibly can to the quality of education that students receive. So please do demand it of us. Don't just expect it of us as some kind of thing that we're doing out of the goodness of our hearts. The second point has to do with, I thought, Dr. Spence's wonderful and very insightful comments on what makes for a productive research university, what makes for a productive ecosystem where the economy benefits without the economy being focused on. Indeed, without the economy being the objective, with knowledge being the objective, with the advancement of knowledge and understanding being the objective, the economy benefits best with that focus that's different, that focus that's indeed on knowledge. And I think the points that you made about capacity building and talent being at the core of any such effort are very insightful for us to take away. The points that you made about the role that the state must continue to play as the major source of funding for research is, I think, very important for us to take away. Because I do agree with you that there is great misunderstanding, certainly in India and around the world, on the example of institutes like Stanford. There is this idea that industry interacts a lot with Stanford. That's true. But there is then an extension that's made from there, that industry is the major source of research funding for a university like Stanford, which is so untrue. It has never been true. It isn't true now, and it's not actually a share that's expanding. And as you, I think, so eloquently pointed out, truly understanding the nature of those interactions and how industry interaction is productive is very powerful. And then the source of public research funding coming from the government on an ongoing basis and being contributed on the basis of the quality of the work being done and not on the basis of potential benefits or applicability. Those essential elements of a productive research ecosystem are essential for, I think, any society that wants to take research and research universities seriously. In our own country, we made an essential mistake. One of those mistakes that I think Sushma's wonderful quote so beautifully illustrated. You know, where a small mistake can condemn generations in the future. About 60 years ago, we made a choice of locating the bulk of public research, publicly funded research, in autonomous R&D institutes instead of in the university system. That's something we have still not corrected. Even today, 2/3 of all national R&D funding is publicly provided. That's okay. But out of the 2/3, out of the 66-67% of total national R&D spending that comes from public sources, 4% is in the university system, and over 60% of the 100% of national R&D spending, over 90% of publicly funded research, still goes into autonomous R&D institutes. And this misplaced targeting of public research is our biggest single opportunity that exists. If we can somehow orient at least the incremental funding to start with towards the university system, and towards the university system broadly defined, both public and private institutes, if we can orient it towards the university system, we have the core then of the beginnings, the core of a truly vibrant research ecosystem. So that's the second point. The third point has to do with quality. And I'd like to relate this to the new education policy that's currently being worked on. And very often when we talk about quality, yes, we should all be concerned about quality. But we seem to have assumed somewhere along the way in our country that we can regulate quality into the education system. So we prescribe who can be admitted and on what criteria. We prescribe who needs to be hired as faculty. We prescribe what fees can be charged by institutes. And in the process of many of these prescriptions, we remove some of the freedom that institutes have to truly address the quality problem. So if we actually wish to address the quality problem, it seems to me that there are two words that we should keep in mind. We should keep the word autonomy in mind, and we should keep the word competition in mind. And we should ask ourselves, with every change that is proposed in the new education policy, does it enhance autonomy? Does it enhance competition? If it enhances competition and if it enhances autonomy, it's worth doing. If it doesn't, it's not worth doing, because it won't, it seems to me, enhance quality. So what are we talking about when we say autonomy? We're talking about the freedom of institutes to set their own curriculum, the freedom of institutes to admit whom they choose, the freedom of institutes to set their own fees, the freedom of institutes to establish what governance structures they think is right for them, and the freedom of institutes to hire the faculty that they wish to. When it comes to competition, what are we talking about again? We're talking about competition for the best students. That happens already. That's the one huge saving grace of our education system in the country. The fact that we have this huge talent pool that is almost inexhaustible and that keeps applying to our institutes across the country, across fields. That competition for places is a very, very powerful engine, and it's something that will continue for many decades to come. Also, competition for faculty. That we do not have enough of. We have a little bit, but not enough. It's only now, as institutes have not been able to fill their student places, as I think I don't know what the official number is, but I'm told somewhere around 20% of all places in engineering colleges are vacant. That's a very powerful, good thing. We may think more than that, 30%? Good, yeah? The reason I say good is because, very often we say, what a terrible waste. It's not a waste. That's what competition is supposed to do. Let supply exceed demand, because only if supply exceeds demand will institutes be forced to compete one with the other on the basis of quality, on the basis of having good faculty, and only then will we be able to start attracting students to our institutes, and where they see the institute as being a worthwhile place to go, where you can go and get a good quality education. And the third area where competition needs to apply is in research funding and research grants. And again, if the government provides research grants to all institutes, but provides it on a competitive basis, where institutes compete one with the other so they can attract this research funding to in turn hire the best faculty who are inspired by that research funding that's then available to them, which enables them to get some of the best students, especially graduate students and so on. That then becomes some of that fruitful ecosystem interplay that we were hearing about just now. So I think these two principles of autonomy and competition are essential, and we should judge, it seems to me, the new education policy on those two words, on whether it enhances autonomy for curriculum, admissions, fees, governance, faculty, and whether it enhances competition for students, for faculty, for research grants. If it does, then it's a good principle and something that we should indeed support and enhance and work with. If it's not, we should work to see that we change it. What then is the right role for the state? What is the role for the government, apart from being a source of this research funding? Well, there's an essential role played that needs to be played by the state, especially in a very complex system like ours, where you have public institutes, private institutes, semi-private institutes, aided institutes. We have I think a dozen different criteria where there are different structures that have been set up reflecting differences in history and origin and different states. And that complexity all needs to be dealt with. How does a student decide which institute is worth going to for him or her? And that's where I think the state can play a very powerful and valuable role in the accreditation and assessment of institutes, in ensuring that there are several bodies out there that can provide that assessment and accreditation, and can then publicly provide information to all students and their parents so they can decide which the best place is for them to go. And I think this public provision of assessments and accreditation, I think, can be a very powerful role for the state, an essential role for the state, and a way in which the state can provide the essential information such that then supply and demand can help address issues of quality in a very fundamental way. Some of this may strike you as being sort of, well, it's never going to happen. I think actually many of those pieces are starting to happen. We do have more and more assessment mechanisms in place. We do now have more institutions that are being tasked with assessments. So far, only public institutions. But I think as we start getting good, credible private institutions that also start playing a role in assessment, and where the state plays a role of actually saying, okay, who's the right group to actually assess, and that can independently assess and make available their information to students and parents such that they can decide things for themselves, I think that can be a very powerful role that can play the essential piece in enhancing the quality of education that's provided. I'd like to congratulate, finally, both Sushma and Dr. Spence for not just the awards, but for all the work leading up to the awards. And it's a privilege to be a part of the function with you both, and a privilege to work, Sushma, with you over many years in many areas relating to higher education and other areas too. So congratulations to you both again. It's a pleasure to be here. Vijay, we have great expectations of you in higher education. The future of the country rests on your shoulders. We'll all look to you. Yes, and you have lots of help and assistance from people like Ninad and Shankar. So great expectations in the years ahead. Finally, I wanted to compliment Shalini. I can't see her.
She's here.
She's here. She's behind me, right? Shalini and her team, not just on organizing things for these 2 days, but for the very high quality of work that has gone into this whole set of publications. I think the more data-based we are, the more we can instruct policy with the right kind of data and the right kind of homework done, such that we're very clear what the expected outcomes would be of whatever we're proposing. So thank you, and I wish you a very successful 2 days.